when I first started to protest against gas, all my friends said I was absolutely crazy. I didn't stand a chance against these big companies. Then within about a year or so, or 2 years, they'd sort of slowly said, well, yes, you're right. Then they came to sort of think the same way as I do. And now the Narrabri gas project has been delayed for over 10 years. And we're still going to delay it, and we're going to stop it.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. The Treasurer knows.
I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day, and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, policy and politics in plain English. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute. And we, Australia, are in the midst of a climate and biodiversity crisis.
Fires and floods, turbocharged by climate change, are now combining with mining, pollution and invasive species, leaving Australia's environment in a state of crisis.
Australia has lost more mammal species than any other continent and has one of the worst rates of species decline among the world's richest countries.
Devastating extent of species decline in the face of climate change.
Really felt the impacts of climate change, disaster and land clearing.
Experiencing its fourth global coral bleaching event.
Environment law is not working for anyone. It's certainly not protecting our environment. We're the extinction capital of the world.
Labor promised an overhaul of key environment legislation, the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, known as the EPBC Act, if it was elected.
So our whole package of environmental law reforms, including our new independent Environment Protection Agency, is designed to give that win-win outcome. Better environmental protection and better, faster decisions for business.
That was supposed to happen in 2023, but it never did. And just last week, Federal Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek announced that this overhaul has been deferred, perhaps indefinitely. It's a move that's been welcomed by fossil fuel companies, and there are concerns that the deferral could pave the way for new gas fields and coal mines, which are in the pipeline for approval. Not only does it mean letting the biodiversity crisis continue, but this decision could make it a whole lot worse, with fossil fuel projects now to be assessed under Howard-era laws, which are widely acknowledged to be broken. In response to this crisis, Australians around the country are rolling up their sleeves and fighting for something better. And one organisation that's helping to redefine the face of activism in Australia is the Knitting Nannas. The Nannas were established in 2012 in Lismore, New South Wales, in opposition to a proposed coal seam gas project. In their own words, they, quote, sit, knit, plot, have a yarn and a cuppa, and bear witness to the war against greedy, short-sighted corporations. Now they've expanded into other parts of Australia and created a fabulously named Nanifesto.
Side of the river, there was Santos doing wrong.
Sydney Knitting Nannas oppose Narrabri gas project because it stinks. It's going to destroy state forest, environment and species, and leave us with huge devastation.
I feel as an older person, it's my duty to stand up and protect our freedom to protest.
In light of the government's disappointing backdown over the EPBC reforms, I'm very excited to bring you this conversation with two members of the Sydney Knitting Nannas, McKenzie and Marie Flood, and the Australia Institute's Principal Advisor on Climate and Energy, Mark Ogge. They joined us in Canberra on Tuesday the 19th of March ahead of our Climate Integrity Summit 2024 at Parliament House. G'day, Kathy, Marie and Mark.
Hi, Ebony.
Hi, Ebony.
So, Kathy, I want to start with you. First of all, can you tell us why you got involved with the Knitting Nannas in Sydney in the first place?
Well, I got involved because I'd done a lot of research into the Great Artesian Basin, and I heard about the Narrabri gas project being the gas project by Santos, and I wanted to do something about it because it was going to affect the Great Artesian Basin, all our water. Water is so precious. I grew up out in Western at Canamble, And I just know how precious water is in this country.
And so it was kind of the impact on water that really made you feel that kind of urgency. How did you come across the Knitting Nannas?
I was going to a few things with Lock the Gate and various people up in Coonamble that I'd met up with again because I'd left Coonamble years ago. And they just sort of pointed me and said that the Knitting Nannas were doing protests in Sydney, so I met up with them there.
And Marie, what about you? How did you come to be involved with the Knitting Nannas?
In a similar way, like I come from the bush as well, and I knew about the Pilliga forest. It was called the Scrub, but on closer inspection it turns out that it's actually a fabulous place. It's a biodiversity hotspot. So I was concerned about the Pilliga. I'd been and lost horribly in the fight to save the Laird forest up that way. And people told me about this group of women in North Sydney. Why didn't I go along and get to know them if I wanted to stay active in stopping fossil fuels?
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about the kinds of activities that the Knitting Nannas get up to. How does your activism kind of present itself? What kinds of things do you do, Kathy?
Well, we go to Parliament, outside Parliament, and do protests out there or rallies out there. We work with a lot of other groups. We knit. Craftivism is very much part of our group, where it's sort of combining craft and activism. And we do that's sort of knitting and also art as well. But I think the thing with the Nannas is we always have fun. When we get together, we're on serious business, but we have a lot of fun.
Santa's hokey pokey. To the Santa's hokey pokey. 'Cause that's what it's all about.
What's it like when you're all together, for example, at a protest outside Parliament or anywhere else where you're engaging in these kinds of activities? What kind of response do you get?
We get a pretty good response because we look bright and cheerful, and we do things like sing. We have people who have very cleverly worked over the words of songs that everybody knows to be in really strong messages about fossil fuels and climate change and renewables and the things that we want as solutions.
And Marie, you talk there about fossil fuels. The Knitting Nannas, I believe, started out protesting against gas and fracking and unconventional gas in particular. But obviously the climate fight is much bigger than that. Can you just tell me a little bit about the kinds of environmental campaigns that the Knitting Nannas are involved in?
Well, over time got engaged with some other issues. We've met people who are trying to preserve koalas from extinction. There's a fabulous colony of koalas in southwest Sydney that's been under threat from overdevelopment of housing and housing companies that refuse to put in the protections that koalas will need. And we could actually lose that really wonderful colony of koalas that's disease-free. It's not looking good, even though at this point the koalas are actually thriving.
For its $3.6 billion coal seam gas project in the Narrabri region. With 850 wells, the project is predicted to produce enough gas every day to meet half the state's needs.
That this project will be well executed and will be responsibly developed to avoid damaging the environment and be very good for the prosperity of the region.
Researchers from the Australian Institute have accused energy company Santos of misrepresenting the estimated costs of Narrabri gas.
Mark, I want to come to you next because I know the Australian Institute's done a huge amount of work around gas, as have the Knitting Nannas. And if we look at kind of the economic and environmental impacts, what are some of the things that people should know about Australia's gas industry in particular?
Yeah, thanks, Ebony. I think the first thing people need to realise is that the gas industry is responsible for a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions. It's almost entirely focused on exports, so it's not gas. It's about 80% of the gas is exported, so it's not gas by and large that we're using in Australia, and that's very emissions intensive. So overall, the life cycle emissions from the gas industry in Australia would be over 200 million tonnes a year, which is, getting on towards the equivalent of half of our entire national emissions. So that's enormous. And there's also terrible impacts for risks and impacts on groundwater and the local environment. In Queensland, where you've got the coal seam gas industry, you actually have subsidence of land because they suck out all the water and gas, and the land subsides and makes it impossible to farm, to do cropping on some properties. So there's all sorts of issues like that, and big issues for the marine environment as well.
Yeah, so it's a concern not just kind of on environmental grounds, but also we've done a lot of work into the economics of gas. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Are they really paying their way in the economy?
The gas industry, and you've got to remember, it's not, people often talk about the Australian gas industry, but actually it's a handful of multinational global oil and gas companies that are allowed to operate in Australia. Some of them are based in Australia, a couple of them, but most of them are overseas companies. So, they make enormous amounts of revenue selling Australian gas overseas, often pay very little tax. A lot of them, year after year, pay no tax at all. They get most of the gas for free. Our government actually gives them the gas without charging them royalties. They've managed to somehow just get a very, very sweet deal in Australia. And so they do enormously well out of it, but very few of the benefits flow through to the Australian community.
We've talked a lot recently at the Australia Institute about the fact that Australia collects more revenue from more money from HECS, from students paying HECS, than we do from the Petroleum Resource Rent Tax.
And the Australian government collects more money from HECS than it does from the Petroleum Resource Rent Tax. Thank you, children. You're the backbone of our economy, not the gas industry.
In your activism, how important is it to, expose some of those problems with the gas industry that the community is facing when you're out there at protests and things like that? What are the kinds of things that people know about the gas industry? Do they know those kinds of things, or are you having to educate people while you're out there?
Well, we educate people all the time on all these issues, and that's part of what we do. That's one of the very important things that we do, and a lot of the nanas, when they first come, know very little, and then they slowly learn. And I think that's really a good part of being the nanas, because they all really like to learn about these things. We actually mentioned that particular fact in one of our recent meetings, and they were horrified.
Yeah.
It was a fact that really hit home. And yes, we need to have those facts because they're really good.
Mm. And do you think those kinds of facts really hit home with people because I guess it makes it more real? Like, we would all know someone, even if they're not in our immediate family, who's kind of studying or what have you. But, we often hear about gas being kind of the backbone of the economy, and it's not really, as Mark's just said, it's not really contributing that much, and it's doing enormous damage. Do people realise that, do you think?
Well, when I first started, no one knew anything about gas, and everyone said that when I first started to protest against gas, all my friends said I was absolutely crazy. I didn't stand a chance against these big companies. Then within about a year or so, or 2 years, they'd sort of slowly said, well, yes, you're right, that then they came to sort of think the same way as I do. And now the Narrabri Gas Project has been delayed for over 10 years. It's probably 12 years now. And we're still going to delay it, and we're going to stop it. There's just no way that it's ever going to go ahead because the community is so against it that it's just not going to happen.
And can you tell us a little bit more about why the community is so opposed to it? You kind of talked about your activism starting with concerns about the Great Artesian Basin, but what are those communities who are really impacted and fighting against it? What are some of their key concerns?
Well, there's so many. It's actually united the community, the farmers, the Gomeroi, the native title, people, and it's united this whole group of people. Then there's the people that have got to do from the Hunter pipeline as well. See, they're all involved. Then there's the Liverpool Plains farmers, because the Hunter pipeline's going to go through there. So it's not just one group of people. It's a really diverse group of people that it's going to affect, this development. And they're very united, and it's been going on too long. The mental health of some of these people that have not been able to do things, you can't improve your property because you don't know whether you're going to have a gas pipeline go through it. You might have built a house only 2 years ago, and then all of a sudden they're coming and saying, well, the pipeline, this is where the pipeline's meant to go. And people can't sell their properties because they don't know. You've got to tell people if these things are happening. And they've known that this pipeline was there and it wasn't on the documents. When you did a search, it didn't come up. And I just think it's despicable what's happened.
Yeah.
Energy giant Santos is imploring the New South Wales government to expedite a pipeline licence for the controversial Narrabri coal seam gas project.
There's been yet another blow to Santos's Narrabri gas project. The federal court has determined that the tribunal didn't, you won't believe this, didn't give enough consideration to climate change.
But those laws were challenged by, can you believe it, the Knitting Nannas protest group, a couple of old lady climate protesters.
The other thing I want to ask is, I think the public and certainly in the media, there's a perception of what an activist or a campaigner looks like, and they're often derided in the media, particularly by the conservative media. So, latte sippers or unemployed people and those kinds of, attempts to denigrate activists, I guess. And I think the Knitting Nannas would give a very different face to activism. So I wonder, would you have any advice for other people who are a bit like you and fed up with all these fossil fuel developments, want to do something about it? Is it hard to get into the Knitting Nannas? Is it scary when you first come in? What is it like when you start to get into that world?
We have ways of bringing people into the Nannas. We have the option of just meeting someone outside of our meetings and activities, just to have a real chat, to ask the questions that they want to ask. Also the fact that we're regularly on the street, so we're seeing one another all the time. We're talking about our issues all the time. We meet weekly, usually on Zoom, and we have drink lots of coffee together so that it's pretty easy to make friends and just to learn a lot through doing things like writing, like we write letters, we write submissions, that sort of thing. And it's really the best way to get to the point where you've got a real handle on a project or an issue, is to actually have to write about it. You've got to get it down to some kind of essence.
Yeah.
We're also a very diverse group. We all come from very different backgrounds and different professions and all sorts of things. So that sort of has been great because everyone's bringing a new skill in a lot of cases and different thoughts and things.
Yeah.
In a sign of protest today, a number of residents and farmers locked themselves to the gate of the property set to be affected.
So Lock the Gate says no to the Narrabri gas project because it's too risky for the impact on our land and our water.
Mark, you've been out to a lot of kind of frontline communities who are fighting big fossil fuel projects. Has that been your experience that these kinds of things really tend to unite a community, and that, it's hard, and as Kathy has said, it kind of takes a long time, but in the end communities are really drawing a line in the sand?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to say that because I go out to these communities, occasionally to sort of talk about our work and that kind of thing. And one thing that's a real constant is the Knitting Nannas are always there with a presence, and they'll sit outside, the offices of our elected representatives and others. And it's just incredibly important because it is just a constant reminder to people about these projects and about these super important issues. So the Knitting Nannas play a really important role. In terms of communities, so it does unite communities, absolutely, but it's also really unfair on communities because these companies like Santos have people paid full time to basically, in various ways foist these projects on the community, and then local members of the community in their own time have to spend a huge amount of time, writing submissions and trying to defend their country. And so there's a real unfairness about that. And that's a terrible thing. But also have to say it's just really inspiring to see communities come together and just say, no, we're not going to allow this. And it's not just a in my backyard kind of thing. It's about real matters of principle and on issues like climate change and that kind of thing. Yeah, people wanting a best outcome for their local community, but also the world community, really, because climate change is such a frightening threat.
And if I can ask you both, if you had any advice for people who want to get involved, how can they get involved with the Knitting Nannas?
Have a look at our website. That's probably the best thing. If you want to communicate by social media, we've got social media platforms, email, and we've even got telephone numbers.
God, that is old-fashioned nowadays, isn't it? How many websites do you go to and there's no one to call with a question? And because you are both activists, if I can end by asking you each, if you had a message for the Environment Minister or the Prime Minister today, what would you want to say to them?
Stop fossil fuels.
Yes, we're here for the kiddies, and we really just have to start, first of all, by stopping all new fossil fuel projects around the country.
There's nothing ambiguous about that message, and hopefully you'll get a few new supporters after the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Ebony.
You can find out more information about the Knitting Nannas, including the full Nanifesto, on their website, knitting-nannas.com. They were in Canberra to attend the Australia Institute's Climate Integrity Summit 2024. To hear all the discussions from this year's summit, including global experts, First Nations leaders and politicians, visit our website at australiainstitute.org.au. This year, the Australia Institute is celebrating its 30th anniversary as Australia's leading think tank. If you enjoy Follow the Money and the Australia Institute's research, please consider becoming a regular donor for as little as $10 a month via our website. Our producer is Jennifer Macy, with additional editing by Emily Perkins. Our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.